All right, and welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here. On this Thursday, May 16th, we have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate, get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is GSMCPodcast.net. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is GSMCPodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker at the bottom of the show segment down below. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we're going to start off the show, talk about the Week 1 matchups with the NFL schedule coming out. We're going to talk about that. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about the Christmas games that were announced that will be broadcasted on Netflix. Then in the third part of the show, I'll talk about the Thanksgiving games and the Black Friday game as well. And then the fourth segment, I will continue my divisional rankings. I will talk about now today the AFC North, so I'll break down that division. And then in the final part of the show, I'll give you an update on Justin Jefferson and his contract situation. But once again, I am joined by a couple of guests, same guest as last week, joining me once again. And that is Manny of the Chip Shot Football Podcast and Emran, the host of the GSMC Soccer Podcast. Guys, great to have you on again. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing good, Kenneth. Thanks for having us on. Excited to talk about the schedule.
Yeah, good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so let's get right into the Week 1 slate. So obviously, when it comes to the schedule, it's kind of like Christmas in May, to see all the matchups, when your team is going to play. I know, Manny, we were kind of talking about it off the air. Not really too thrilled with the Giants' schedule this year, and it seems like that's always a common thing. But yeah, so the schedule's out, but we were going to just break down the Week 1 matchup. So there's definitely a few intriguing matchups. You got the Chiefs and the Ravens to start off the season on Thursday night. That's to get us all started. Then I also wanted to talk about a little bit with your team, Manny. They're playing against Kirk Cousins, his first game with the Falcons. And not only that, it's going to be an Arthur Smith revenge game because now he's the offensive coordinator of the Steelers. You also have the Browns and the Cowboys, which I talked about on a previous show. And then the Sunday night and Monday night games I think are going to be good. The Sunday night matchup, they played in the playoffs, but now Matthew Stafford once again will be returning to Detroit to take on the Lions. So I think that's going to be a great game. And then, if Aaron Rodgers plays more than 4 plays this time around, I think, that matchup against the 49ers could be a good game as well. So I want to get your guys' thoughts. What are some of your thoughts on the Week 1 slate? What's one game that stands out? Who wants to go first?
I'll let everyone go.
Uh, well, there's a lot of good games in week one, just in general. I mean, you start off with the AFC Championship rematch, which, whenever you have two teams so obvious that they're gonna most likely be up like gonna be up there in the standings when it comes late into the season. I really don't like the fact that they play each other week one. I really don't like the notion of division games within the first 4 or 5 weeks, just because teams are early, they're still getting their foot in, teams steadily progress, and I don't like the like some like of the important games being early, but there's the game in Brazil on Friday that's unique with the Packers playing the Eagles. I think the Eagles, this is the kind of be their first opportunity to show that last year's ending was a fluke and this team got better. And then Green Bay, they have a chance to, replicate what they did at the end of last year. And then also, I have to speak about the Monday night game as a 49er fan. You know, last year, the 49ers, they got off to a very easy start the first 5 games. They didn't have much of a test. We thought maybe the Steelers could test us in week one, but that didn't really came out. And now I think the 49ers are fully going to be tested. I think this is a good Jets team. I think what they did offensive line wise to help Aaron Rodgers. I think Garrett Wilson this year is going to take the next level, having Aaron Rodgers all season, hopefully. And I think also another thing that's not talked about is the fact that Robert Saleh is going to be coming back. This is the first time he's coached against his former team. It's going to be at Levi's. So there's a lot of storylines there, and it's Monday night. It's a worthy Monday night game.
Yeah, I agree. There are a lot of other than just like the big ones, like you mentioned, Emran. There's some other interesting ones that I've just now sort of started looking into a little bit more. One of them is the Raiders at the Chargers is one that might not get a lot of headlines, but I think it's a little interesting just because you get the Raiders full new season with their new head coach Antonio Pierce, the new Jim Harbaugh era in Los Angeles. The game's going to be in Los Angeles, so that's exciting. First week there, first home game. How the Chargers look, how different do they look? What does the offense look now with Justin Herbert? I think that's going to be a pretty decent matchup between the two of them. And also another one that caught my eye is the Texans playing at the Colts, a divisional game there in the AFC South. But you get to see CJ Stroud play against Anthony Richardson, which is going to be a great matchup because we didn't get to see too much of Richardson last year. He had some good games, I think, against I want to say the Jaguars and the Rams were his two best ones. But then other than that, we kind of were just robbed of seeing him play a full season. And not to say he could have had a season similar to CJ. He could have, but we don't know. But seeing those two young quarterbacks there, I think will be exciting. Then, like you mentioned, Kenneth, the Kirk Cousins against the Steelers in his first game, how that dynamic works there, and Arthur Smith going back to Atlanta, I think would be a good test for both teams, both young teams, new quarterbacks. So that'll be a good matchup, pretty close as well, I would think.
Yeah, and then the other matchup as well, that I wanted to mention, the Titans and the Bears. So that'll be Caleb Williams' first start. And I know we're not going to talk about week 2, but then the following week we're going to see C.J. Stroud against Caleb Williams on Sunday Night Football. So I thought that's an
Wow.
intriguing matchup right out of the gate as well. And yeah, I mean what you said with Anthony Richardson and C.J. Stroud, we really didn't get to see much of Anthony Richardson because he got hurt earlier in the season. So hopefully we get to see both matchups. Hopefully we get to see both of them play each other twice this come around this year. And then a matchup that I think is kind of funny is in the late window is the Broncos and the Seahawks. Russell Wilson's former teams going at it, and
Yeah.
he's no longer. He's now with the Steelers. So I thought that was it's funny how they're playing each other, and he's not on either team anymore. And I'm curious to see what the Seahawks do at the quarterback position because they did acquire Sam Howell, and I've talked about this a few times on the show, but I think Sam Howell could definitely push Geno Smith for that starting job. And Geno Smith has done a nice job since he took over as the starter when they traded Russell Wilson. But I feel like Sam Howell could definitely, you know, put up a fight for this starting quarterback job. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. Also, some of the other games, you got the Commanders and the Buccaneers. Jaden Daniels, that'll be his first start against Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. Also, the Jaguars and the Dolphins. That's in the early window. That could be a good game, I think. You know, two teams from Florida playing each other in Miami. I think that could be an interesting matchup. And I know, speaking of the Dolphins, I know yesterday in the production meeting when I did when I told everyone what my AFC East rankings was, there was a very awkward silence. Um, Putting the Dolphins at 3, and you know, it is what it is. I'm going to stand by it, and we'll see how the season plays out. But yeah, so that was an interesting moment in the production meeting. But like I said, I'm going to stand by it, and we'll see how this season unfolds. Also, the Giants playing the Vikings. I mean, we'll see if J.J. McCarthy ends up starting, or is it going to be Sam Darnold? I feel like that could be a winnable game for the Giants because I don't really. The Giants, to me, I don't think are going to win a lot of games. I mean, I think most people agree with that. But I feel like with the uncertainty at quarterback for the Vikings, and if it ends up being J.J. McCarthy's first start, maybe the Giants have a chance to maybe steal that game earlier in the season, and it's a home game. So we'll see. Also, the Giants, Manny told me, and I had to check because I didn't realize they have new uniforms as well. Interesting design, I would say.
Yeah,
But
interesting colors. Interesting colors on
yeah,
them.
yeah. So I'm
I
curious.
like their uniforms.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see when they're gonna wear that. I mean, it should be. I mean, I'm guessing it's gonna be a home game.
Right.
Maybe when Saquon comes back to MetLife, that maybe that'd be a good
That would
time
be
to.
interesting.
But we'll see. And I think that's pretty much. Oh, then you got the Patriots and the Bengals as well. That's in the early window. Healthy Joe Burrow coming back. The Patriots. I'm curious to see if Drake May is going to start right off the bat, or are we going to see Jacoby Brissett? And then the last matchup, early window, Cardinals and the Bills. And the Cardinals will have a full season of Kyler Murray, so I think they're going to win a couple more games than they did last year because they didn't finish with a great record. I still don't look at them as a team that's going to be, competing for a playoff spot. I still think they are, maybe a year or two away. Well, maybe a little bit more than that. I'm not too sure, but I think they'll definitely win more games than they did last year. And, with the Bills, they got a different revamped receiving core. Stephon Diggs is not there anymore. They lost Gabe Davis. So, you still got Khalil Shakir, who I think is a good player for them. But, they also drafted a receiver, and they brought in several others, Chase Claypool, Valdez Scantling, however you feel about them. But, that's who they brought in to replace Stephon Diggs. And that's in Buffalo. So, we'll see how that game goes. But, yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to the Week 1 slate. Any final thoughts with any of these games?
Just I guess the last thing on it, the Packers and the Eagles in Sao Paulo, Brazil. That'll be just interesting, not just because of the game. The game's going to be entertaining, but
Yeah.
just seeing how it's received down there, what the atmosphere is like in a soccer stadium. I think that'll be interesting to watch outside of just what's played on the field.
Yeah, and I've talked about that game a few times. That one I think is one of the better games of Week 1 as well, and it's going to be interesting just having the regular kickoff game on Thursday, then you got a game the following night,
Right.
and then you got Sunday and Monday. So maybe they'll move a game, they'll flex a game to Saturday just so you got games, 5 days in a row, but because there's a game pretty much every day of the week except for Tuesday. So maybe they'll put a game on Tuesday. All right, so we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Christmas games that were announced on Netflix and just give our thoughts on, the games being on Netflix. We'll talk about all that when we come back from our first break of the show. So with that being said, stick around and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.